Aspen Beach, one of the few beaches landed here on Guam during World War II. July 21st, 1944, this beach was stormed by Allied troops to take back this island for convenient bombing on Japan. And that is what we'll be doing today. We'll be going into the depth of everything you need to know about this historical place and beach. So join me as we adventure through this time in history. It needs to be shown.
Before we get into the video, I was going to explain the brief history of Guam. So basically, Guam was founded by this dude named Magellan. Magellan circumnavigated the globe, but in this process he discovered Guam, which was previously inhabited by the local Chamorros. And then he discovered Guam, basically took it over, the Spanish era happened, and then, America took it over, and then this naval era happened, and then after that naval area, Japanese took it during the start of World War II, right after Pearl Harbor, and then the Americans took it again on July 21st. So that's just a brief history, kind of confusing, kind of complicated, but still. Please like, share, subscribe, and enjoy the video.
Are we rolling?
Yep.
Oh, sorry. Name's Bond. Welcome to Guam. So, for the past 2 years, I've lived on this island. A little rock in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. If you don't know where it is, here's a picture of it. Guam is a tropical island, and it is one of the biggest in all of the Marianas. With a length of 32 miles and a width being 12 miles at its biggest point, and 3 miles at its smallest point. The United States gained control of Guam after taking it from Spain. But on December 10, 1941, following the attack by the Japanese on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese invaded Guam and took it successfully with very little casualties. Guam was the least fortified island in all of the Marianas, with other islands like Saipan, which had been under Japanese control since World War I, being way more fortified. That is until 1944 rolled around. The Japanese sensed an American reoccupation and the taking of Guam, since Guam was very crucial to bomber attacks on Japan. So they beefed up their defenses, making it the most fortified island and one of the hardest to take in all of the Marianas, with Guam having the largest Japanese garrison of the 29th Infantry Division. Guam was a key point in the taking of Japan. Guam, Saipan, and Cheyenne were chosen because of their size, and building airfields on these would allow bombing raids on the main island of Japan. Capturing Guam would make it easier to take the Philippines, the Ryukyu Islands, and Taiwan. Building air bases would allow B-29 bombers to bomb Japan, and it would allow the bombardment of the Bonin Islands and Iwo Jima by B-24 Liberators. Plus Apra Harbor, which is that way. This is Aspen, so it's over there. Plus Apra Harbor, the only deep harbor in all the Marianas, would allow for a base for ships transporting goods and men to other islands that they were taking, such as the ones that I've listed previously. The invasion of Guam was supposed to follow the invasion of Saipan on the 18th of June, but because of the unexpected Japanese ships in the area and an unplanned huge Japanese garrison on Saipan, the invasion of Guam was postponed for over a month. Just like the rest of the Pacific, the invasion started with a bang. Literally. The invasion of Guam started with heavy bombardment of the selected landing beaches. Asin was one of them. So Asin Beach was unrecognizable after the bombardment. And the other beach was Agate, which is just down there at the Navy base. Or there at the Navy base. Yeah. The other beach was at there, at the Navy base. Asin Beach was heavily bombed by destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and bombers that took off from 12 aircraft carriers that bombed and helped in the taking of the Pacific. The bombardment was not consistent, though, with some bombing from B-24 bombers on the 11th, 12th, and 13th of June. Also, on the 13th, the U.S. fleet was preoccupied sinking 7 Japanese cargo ships and several other vessels. This meant less bombardment and more sea action. On the 12th of June, several U.S. battleships and cruisers started the bombardment of the island of Guam. Later in the week, on July 4th, a carrier group joined in the bombardment and followed by 2 more carrier task groups on the 6th of June. The 6th of June was also the day that Normandy was landed on. You know, Normandy. We've all heard about that. The invasion of Guam was actually supposed to happen on June 8th, 2 days after the invasion of Saipan, but did not because of the huge Japanese garrison on Saipan and a lack of naval superiority with the taking down of submarines. Therefore, the invasion of Guam was postponed to a month later, on July 21st, 1944. The U.S. did know the geography of Guam well, though, because the U.S. had been in control of Guam for decades prior to World War II. That allowed not as much, scaling of geography and more attacking, because it's hard to bomb and stuff without a good map that you can rely on. But to get a better view of Asin Beach, submarines were sent to get some pictures and footage of what defenses the Japanese had put up in the years prior to the invasion. In nearly over 3 years that they had occupied the island. The invasion of Guam hinged on air and naval superiority, so some 274 warships participated in the bombardment and conquering of the surrounding seas. The ships would fire their 2- and 5-inch guns 44,978 times, with an additional 4,283 bombs dropped on the island. That's over 1,310 tons of explosive. That's over 3 times the amount dropped on Britain during the Blitz in 1941 and 40. These bombers were all... The bombs that were dropped on Guam were all dropped from the 8th of July to the 20th of July. The heavy bombardment of beaches made it go from a beautiful tropical island, like you see here today, that hosts many tourist sites, to a wholly burnt piece of dirt in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Here are some pictures of that. It was bad. Especially the beaches, like this. They were all burnt and the palm trees were all left burning with no leaves on it. Many of these are not from the real invasion of Guam. They had to be cut down because they were so severely damaged. All the burnt palm trees that were burning and the buildings and everything on fire could be seen from a long distance away. The bombardment of Guam was more than the Japanese expected, with the bombardment wiping out guard towers and some above ground and military bases, especially some of the concentration camps that the Japanese hosted here on the island of Guam in the 3 years that they occupied it. But the Japanese were well dug in. The bombardment did not do as much as the Americans hoped for, because of the many underground trenches and bunkers that the Japanese had built. But some well-entrenched pieces of artillery made it through. These would help defend the beaches and all of Guam from the inevitable American onslaught. Also, many men, supplies, weapons survived the bombardment, with the help from concrete boxes, trenches, and deep caves. But some heavy artillery did puncture the heavy fortifications near the beach. The closest trench and pillboxes to the beach were over 4 kilometers away. But there is a really cool bunker over there that we might get to go to. The rough terrain of Guam made the landing harder, with sharp coral and big waves being a huge problem. And as you can see behind me, it did not look so easy. And though most beaches have coral really close to the beach where the waves break, this isn't the problem. The water all the way to where the waves break out there is probably 4 or 5 feet deep, making it really hard to get LTVs and landing craft directly to the beaches. Beginning on June 18th, though, UTD personnel began blowing up nearly 1,000 Japanese planted coral and concrete boxes off the designated landing beaches of Asin. The northern sector, red, green, and blue, and agate, southern sector, yellow and white, both on Guam's west side. And from a map, you can see it that there's this little poke thing out here. There's an airstrip there. And then one side is Asin and one side is agate. The island of Guam was still defended by over 19,000 Japanese troops. And they had some planes to help from the 58th Fast Carrier Task Fleet. Despite the upcoming resistance, W-Day, as the invasion of Guam was known as, was to happen on July 21st, 1944, and it did. At 8:29, the U.S. 3rd Marine Division landed at Asin Beach to the south of the other side of Apra Harbor and the Orote Peninsula, and the 1st Provisional Brigade landed at Agate Beach. The 77th Infantry Division was saved for later and the second invasion of Guam. At Asin, landing craft were barred from direct access to the beaches by a coral reef. Thus, the 3rd Division of Marines were forced to wade ashore. Thus, the 3rd Division Marines were transferred at the reef line from their landing craft to amphibious tractors, LVTs, which carried them to the shore. In both northern and southern sectors, landing forces met with determined Japanese resistance. The Japanese inflicted heavy casualties and sank over 30 U.S. LTVs. But after much resistance, the beaches were secure at 0900 hours. Most of the men, tanks, made it ashore, but more lay ahead of them. And that is why we are here today, to remember all the men who died here for what they believed in. A few days later, on the 23rd and the 24th of July, the 77th Infantry Division landed. But this was less successful because of the lack of amphibious vehicles most of them had been used in the first invasion, and sharp coral reef. The men were forced to land at the start of the reef, meaning they had to wade ashore. And this is not a close distance, as you can see, where those waves break to here. This left them open and undefended to machine guns. The men did eventually make it ashore, but in the next few days the men would have trouble getting supplies because the reef was so far out, and the lack of amphibious vehicles did not help. The 1st Provisional Brigade blocked off the Orote Peninsula on July 25th, and that same night Japanese Lieutenant General Takashaka counterattacked, coordinated with a smaller attack against the 3rd Division to the north. The next day, General Obata reported, "Our forces failed to achieve the desired objectives." Lieutenant General Takashaka was killed on the 28th of July, and Lieutenant General Hideyoshi Obata took over command of the Japanese defenders. On July 28th, the two beachheads were linked of Asin and Agate. And by the 29th of July, the Americans secured the peninsula, which is a lot of ground to cover with very hard terrain to cross and meant much Japanese resistance. But the Japanese did not give up easily. Even though the Japanese had very little food and only a small number of tanks and weapons, Many counterattacks were made during the first few nights of Guam, but no matter what the Japanese did, they could not keep the Americans at bay. Abata withdrew his troops from the southern tip of Guam, planning to make a stand at the mountain's central and northern part of the island, to engage in delaying action in the jungle in northern Guam to hold the island as long as possible, was his mission. And that did not help, because a few months later, in August, the island would be secured, and in those weeks that the island was secured, airstrips would be built and planes would already be bombing Japan, returning the bombs from Pearl Harbor. Is that it?
Yeah, we're good.
We're good.
Hey guys, if you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. It took a lot of work from me and my team to make this video happen. So if you would like to see more of this content, or you like what we're doing here, it would be great if you could support us in any way. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.